situation.
So after it's over, what happens, Dave? You shake hands and say, hey, that's just business, sorry about that, or do you just not say anything?
Well, I think if you do it with respect, there should be no sorry. I mean, what are you sorry for? I mean, if the things you're putting out there are true, and you can defend them, and you're willing to acknowledge the player's positive attributes, and I don't think there's anything to apologize for, as long as it's done with respect. I don't think there's any reason to, in our situation, I would never approach arbitration as trying to reduce a guy to rubble. That doesn't do anybody any good.
Because it seemed like the Rangers were trying to do that with Avery. Of course, he's emailing Larry Brooks, and he's pointing out all the negative parts that the Rangers said about him. But it seemed like that's what they were trying to do to him.
Well, I think I'm not going to comment on what was part of that process, except for you have to look at were some of the things that were said in that arbitration and any other one, were they true? Some of those things may be true, and if that's the case, then why shouldn't they bring them out?
Nashville, they've just signed the letter of intent. Do you think, personally, your own personal thoughts, that Nashville's an NHL city?
You know what? I think it could be. I think if you look at what's happened to date, you could say it's been disappointing because they've done a very good job with that hockey club. They've been exciting. They play a good brand of hockey.
And lost $70 million doing it.
Yeah. So, I think that maybe this is a wake-up call for the city, that they'll stand behind them. It is a pretty good town. I know people think of it as, going to Nashville, it must be awful. It's not awful, and players don't mind playing there. So, if they are going to stay in Nashville, I certainly hope that they support them, because they put a pretty good product on the ice.
I got to ask you this, and I don't know how how much you can say, but everybody in our city and hockey fans across Canada are wondering why the move was blocked to Southern Ontario. Was that a problem with the NHL, or was it a problem with Craig Leopold, who seemed upset about the fact that Balsillie was selling tickets before the deal was even done?
You know what? That's probably a question for someone a lot brighter and higher up than I am. So
had to ask it. Yeah.
We're talking with Dave Nonis, General Manager of the Vancouver Canucks. We will open to the boards in a few minutes at 280-TEAM. That's 280-8326. Let's get on to the Canucks itself, the hockey club. The first place that I want to start is with the schedule, which I'm really not a fan of it at all. This unbalanced schedule doesn't work at all, and I know that it upsets a lot of fans that they won't see these star players for like every 3 years. Your thoughts about the schedule first, and then secondly about finally getting Crosby in your building.
Well, I think my opinion on the unbalanced schedule. I don't like it. I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't have every team in our building once a year, or at the very worst play them once a year. So I think that's something that we've pushed hard for. We're going to continue to push for it, not just for for ourselves, but for like 2.0, for the fans who come to our building on every night and would like to see everyone in here. So I'm not a fan of it. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't have a schedule where we see everybody at least one time.
And what about, Dave, here's something that upsets me and a lot of other people about the schedule: 13 Saturdays for the Canucks. To me, that's just not enough. I mean, it's such a tradition to watch Hockey Night in Canada, in Vancouver, and especially so with the Canucks, and that's a disappointment to a lot of people.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of things I could point to that schedule and say I'm disappointed in.
Yeah.
That might be one of them. But if you look at that schedule, there's a lot of things that we're doing with it they're tough. They don't make a whole lot of sense. And I know it's very difficult when they put the schedule together. You have some buildings that have multiple tenants. You have some buildings that have large stretches with trade shows or circus or whatever. So it is hard to put a schedule together, and I understand that. But I'm not a big fan of this schedule. I know this year's version in particular I think is tough, but you have to live with it, and we'll move forward.
How much input do you have in it?
Zero. We provide your dates.
Yeah.
And we provide as many as we can to give them flexibility so that they can put together the best schedule possible. But in terms of saying when we're going to play, the league, but that's the same in every sport too. Like NBA teams don't have any say in when they play. You provide your dates, and they come back with a schedule, and you try to make changes if you can, and if you're successful, great, and if not, then you're playing the dates they give you.
But take a look at this. February the 7th, you're in Atlanta. You're in Atlanta on the 7th. You fly home. The next day after you get home, you play back-to-back home games against Colorado and Chicago. Those aren't home games. No. They're away games in your own building.
Well, the Pittsburgh game's even worse. If you look at that one, I know why they want to have Saturday night, with Sidney Crosby here, and I think that's great. But that's basically, I think it turns out to be a 10-game road trip.
Because I think you come back for that one game.
Yeah. So, and that's you know, we can complain about it, and I'd love to do that, but it is what it is, and we have to now move forward and try to win with that schedule.
December the 2nd to the 15th, you're in 8 different cities in 13 days. Unbelievable. And in March, there's a stretch between the 10th and the 18th where you play 10 of 13 games on the road.
I know.
Like you said, he's not a fan of the schedule.
I think it's the worst schedule I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't know about your opinion, but I think it's the worst schedule I've ever seen.
Well,
and it's unfair.
I would love to disagree with you on this one point, Dave, but I'm not going to.
All right, let's move along. Todd Bertuzzi, when he comes back, what do you expect?
In what way? In terms of...
No,
he says it's not a big deal.
It's a regular season game, November the 27th, good point.
Yeah.
And Todd has been on this show, was it yesterday or the day before, saying that's not a big deal.
Well, I think it's going to be a big deal for him. It's hard. It's easy to say that, and I think he'll play well. I do believe that Todd is going to have a pretty good year. I think he's still a good player. I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think coming back here, he'll be fired up. I think he'll have a good night.
Were you as taken aback as everybody else was from the outside looking in at Todd's contract, $8 million over 2 years?
No, I think when you look at other contracts that were signed, then you put it all in perspective, and probably doesn't look that far off. I think maybe some people thought because he had an injury-plagued year that it would be a one-year deal. I think, I'm sure Todd had a number of one-year offers.
He did, yeah. We had his agent on yesterday, yeah.
So I think at that point you look at what's the best 2-year deal, and you take it.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break, come back, start taking your calls at 280-TEAM. That's 280-8326, and we'll get into the future of the Sedins. What's going to happen with Naslund, what's going to happen with Morrison. We'll get into all of that, plus the signings this summer, which you've been very busy, especially with the Bieksa deal, the 3-year deal for $11.25. We'll get into all when we come back. You've got it on the Team 1040, also seen on Rogers Sportsnet.
More Brad and Taylor is coming up on the Team 1040 at Rogers Sportsnet.